The ego is the system that runs your sense of self. It is made out of thought patterns, emotions, and behavioral loops, and the stories that try to hold it all together. Left unchecked, it creates endless existential searching, chronic disconnection, and the persistent sense that something is wrong. The goal of my videos is clarity, to see your identity and its contradictions for what they are, named precisely, to finally understand what it is that we're all running away from. There are three models of identity that define who you think you are. In philosophy, the question is always, what is the self? What is the I that experiences? Because if every atom you were as a kid has already been transformed into something else, then there can't really be a physical identity carrier giving you the sense of consistent self over space and time. The present moment experience seems to continue even without a clear pointer to what, where, or who is continuing, and where the sense of continuity is even coming from. That's why depending on who you are, you have a different way to think about who you are across time and what it means for you to carry your identity towards the future. What is space and what is death? And why are you and not any other being in existence? First and foremost, the standard way of looking at identity is closed individualism, which is the common sense perception of our default operating system, like the standard human egoic perception. It says that I am me, and you are a single continuous entity that survives through time from the moment you are born until the moment you die. You are trapped inside your own soul or your own skin and are separate completely from everybody else. It's important to note that it is not relevant if you believe the soul persists after death or doesn't persist after death, or if you believe it is a soul or if it is just your human body, your human consciousness. The point of closed individualism is that it is basically a closed system. Either you cease after death, or after death something continues, but it is still fundamentally you. From this model, your sense of identity remains intact, and you remain to be always the same experiencer. So the point of closed individualism is that you are one thing and remain one thing across time. The lived experience, phenomenologically, is that you feel like you are in a meat suit, like a sort of meat mech, and you are likely perceiving yourself to be behind your eyes. And what this does is that it creates a pretty lonely perspective of experience, because everything is seen in separation. It is also a very competitive way to look at reality, where everything is driven by survival and you must protect your own body at all costs. Every other person is somewhat seen as an NPC and an obstacle in your own movie, or something that needs to be corroborated with. You know that other humans are real and they, of course, matter. Just because you believe you are an individuated self that is basically a closed system doesn't mean that other people necessarily don't matter to you. You can have empathy, of course. I mean, most people have, but you still treat other people somewhat like NPCs. You don't actually understand or see the depth of the full conscious range of other individuals, or you kind of say it doesn't actually matter that much because they're not you. For many, this mode of operation is actually very riddled with anxiety because it requires the ego to do a lot of work in order to feel separate from everybody else. It needs to prop up constantly a sense of identity that remains solid and separate from everyone else through all, troubles that life gives you. Even though your perception and sense of experience changes, you still have the same memories, the same likes, the same dislikes, the same worldviews, and all of this prop up a sense of individuated, singular self that is separate from everything else. It is believing that you are a subject looking at objects externally from you, and you are the subject internally. And the separation matters and is important. There's also a healthy version of this, of course, which is an ego that has found ground in solidity in its separation, and in its own identity, which is usually where genuine self-esteem and compassion for oneself comes from. And it can feel then quite comfortable because you just like yourself and you like being yourself. You are individuated. So although for most people, this is through egoic conditioning and society, a very neurotic state of being, often once people find either the belief in God or the belief in an afterlife or some other grander purpose that kind of unites their sense of separation with the sense of doing something in service for another being that, isn't you, then, life feels meaningful for most people. And there's this sense also that Stoicism helps a lot, where you accept your own position in the separation and feel that it is good that this is consistently the case. Now, secondly, we have empty individualism, which is kind of like the psychological shredder of identity. In this model, it says that you do not actually exist across time. A person is just a rapid sequence of momentary experiences, like singular frames in a movie reel. The you who went to sleep last night is basically dead. And the you experiencing this exact second is a brand new identity that will die 1 second from now. In this view, there are no real individuals, and every sense of ego and I-ness and personal relationshipness of things is an illusion propped up by the brain. You as a baby and you as a human are not the same entities, but basically experience models that shift and morph, and there's nothing holding them together. In this way, you and another person aren't really two different individuals, but an infinite amount of tiny instances of perception and awareness. And from this view, you can imagine yourself to be basically like a bright star just shining. And it doesn't really make sense to ask, why am I this star and not any other star? Because in this model, you are basically all stars at the same time, or pretty much no star at all. And all sort of personal ownership of any experience must be an illusion, because it's just, this empty space. There's the illusion of continuity propped up by the brain, but in actuality, you're just, the snapshot of experience that then creates the self-model. And through a long-term cohesive self-modeling and memory retraction, you basically believe yourself to be a singular human identity that has continuity, which all of this is pretty much the Buddhist reductionist view of no self. The idea that there is no self and reality is fundamentally empty of any personal connective tissue. Lived experience-wise, like phenomenologically, when you model reality or see reality in empty individualist lens, you might start to feel weightless and detached and sometimes terrifyingly groundless. It is often the consequence of an ego death experience. And when you build a mind that believes epistemologically, like the nature of what you can know and can't know, that you are just really these frames of experiences and all your past is basically inexistent now, like it's just basically an illusion, then it can be very beneficial for your psychological health, because all narratives of the ego of stuff that you regret from the past, traumas that you have gone through, and worries about the future basically evaporate in the emptiness of the self. So there's not attachment anymore, clinging and resisting and trying to own experience. Like when you're feeling good, you want to own the moment of feeling good and basically having this to be you, or you are being in pain and you don't want to reject it and you don't want it to be you. Well, in this empty relating way of seeing reality, you don't have this mechanism because there's no friction. Basically, reality moves through you. There's just pure fleeting appearances. Empty individualism often seems like the ultimate spiritual realization whenever you see reality in that way. Like the shift in consciousness whenever you see reality that way for the first time is very intense. It feels like reality is a dream or a sort of illusion, and there are actually no individuals at all. But it can also be utterly terrifying because it implies that there is no ego and you are basically alone in some sense, but not even that, because there's nobody there to be alone. So there are not really other people in this framework, just appearances constructed through conditions. It is emptiness all the way, according to the Buddhists. When in the processing of coming to terms when life is being seen in this way, everything can feel quite solipsistic. Solipsistic meaning that you feel like you're the only being in the universe, and that time is a complete illusion, and therefore the universe just basically found itself in its only possible configuration, which is you right now. And from this point of view, it feels like, or it can feel like, that there's only one conscious experience happening right now, which is your own personal awareness. And this can be very, very trippy. And when you have this like switch of reality construction where you see it this way, it can feel like that you are God and that you created the entire universe. And right now, the universe is only you. It has also some very dark implications because it implies that this state space of consciousness is basically kind of forever locked in place whenever you are in it. Like any instance of pain, for example, is basically in some form in the state forever. And like the qualia, like the sense of experiencing something in this moment is all that it can be and all that it ever will be from this particular snapshot of experience, which can also be kind of creepy feeling. The thing is that as humans, we don't really experience ourselves in this way all the time. Like we have normally a sense of continuity. So it might sound very odd to think about reality in this way, but there is a ton of relief that genuinely happens when this is truly integrated and you don't lose yourself in narratives of now being God or now being every being in existence, in its emptiness, or feeling like super detached from other human experiences. If you don't fall into these kind of neurotic models, which oftentimes you kind of have to move through them until you kind of settle into an empty individualism that is healthy. But once you've settled into this, then pretty much all worry about the past and the future cease because you're always extremely present. The more you drop into the sense of presence or empty individualism, the less lonely you feel and the less you seek some existential satisfaction because it's already there all the time and there's nothing else that you can be but this empty form appearing in all shapes and sizes. It is very healing for many and very derealizing for newcomers. The trick is to recognize that whatever shape your perception of empty individualism takes is still your mind constructing a reality model. No matter how much it seems like it's the ultimate nature of reality you've figured out, it is still a way the brain is structuring itself. Maybe closer to some actual reality, and it's also not all or nothing, like there's certain flavors of empty individualism, some that are very lighthearted, some that feel more filled with suffering because the ego is still clinging. So it's not like an all or nothing, but there's clearly a structural foundational shift that happens when this is seen. If you feel like you are getting depressed and you're feeling more lonely than ever, then it is precisely because the ego tries to overlay meaning over it and cling to a sort of solidity in its emptiness. Instead of basically believing in full empty individualism and completely dissolving into these empty frames of experience, it basically solidifies itself into them and then believes itself to be still like an I, like a thing that still relates to itself. And there's where the solipsistic mechanism happens, because now you haven't actually deconstructed your ego internally, but externally you believe everything is an illusion and people don't actually exist. And then you feel extremely alone because you believe your ego is the only thing that exists and you can only relate to yourself as the ultimate existence, but you are not actually empty. You have not actually dissolved the ego. but it might extremely seem like this because you've become solipsistic and can only perceive your own awareness, or like believe you're kind of like a bubble reality that cannot see outside itself, which is a state of utter illusion or a delusion. It requires you to actively believe that other experiences are not real. And it is tricky because from the perspective of empty individualism, if you also meditate for long enough, it feels like objectively the case that, yeah, of course, you can only experience your own reality. You never can move outside of your mind. So you are quite literally the entire universe from your perspective. But if accepted and done right, it's really freeing and a way of operating more lightly and flow-like with reality, where everything just has less stakes and everything is flowing on its own. And how you can guess, there are, shapes and shades where you can be in closed individualist, but still get some, let's say, spices from empty individualism that helps you dissolve edges that you have around your closed individualist framework. So the mind is very complex and can construct itself using different modes of perception. And third, we have open individualism, which is basically the universal mirror. It says that the boundaries between people are complete biological illusions. There's only one universal subject of experience in the entire universe. In open individualism, you are the exact same awareness looking out of my eyes right now, and your neighbor's eyes, and a stray dog's eyes. You are everyone, everywhere, all at once, just localized in different biological hardware. You see your own conditioned existence as something that is here now as much as now somewhere else. All just different vantage point of the same fundamental identity. So then the answer to the question of why am I in this body and not in another body would be, you're going through all bodies in all possible universes, through all times and space. So of course you also must be here. It's pretty much the idea of the egg that talks about this, endless reincarnation into all possible states of being. This sense of awareness without a clear individualized center is implied in a lot of spiritual traditions, and it is seen to be timeless and equal. When you are perceiving that this is the case, it also strikes with immense obviousness that this is true, because you cannot find a way to make your consciousness ultimately distinct from other consciousness. When you stop believing yourself to be just a physical body, then there's the sense that we are fundamentally all the same. We are all just consciousness experiencing oneself. And this is what the universe does all the time. There's a strong sense of immortality that can also be born from it, which kind of feels crazy. And these God realizations from empty individualism find themselves also here. The difference is that in open individualism, you kind of see a sense of self that relates basically to everything all the time, instead of saying that there is no self that relates to basically nothing all the time. Even if you were to cease, there will be infinite other versions of life experience, as the physical laws of the universe say energy can never be destroyed and only transformed. There's no way for you to permanently disappear, as ground awareness of all things is what reality is like. Now, there's a lot of overlap again with solipsism and derealization or psychosis, as these sort of mental illnesses tap into the sense of either open or empty individualism. And when the ego resists this sense of overwhelming immensity of the nature of one's identity, because you have to imagine you suddenly believe yourself to be everybody. It is so psychologically overwhelming that this resistance, it creates immense psychological suffering, and is then what causes these psychological illnesses, because you're confronted with something that feels so undeniably true, but you cannot possibly accept. Now, with empty individualism, it is more a feeling of dissolving into experience, because you cannot hold on to anything anymore. Like, you cannot hold on to the past nor the future, and you see yourself in these tiny frames of experiences. And in open individualism, the sense is more that you see yourself always present across all timelines, across all time and space. Perceiving open individualism as true forces you to take life way more seriously in some form. And it makes you empathize with everything way more. Because, yeah, you are kind of everybody. So from there, the mind can easily spiral because all of a sudden it has to come to terms with all of this immensity. And yeah, all of the experiences that reality implies that are inevitable. And I think this is also very telling because if you have to come to terms with the fact that you actually are all stray dogs in all of infinity, well, then it creates a fear for the ego. And if you think about it very logically, let's say that this is true. Now, if this is true, it's just true. There's nothing to argue or fight against. But if you realize this is true and suddenly you imagine yourself to suffer other lifetimes, now the boundary is starting to dissolve and reality is expanding in your own perception because suddenly it's not just all about you anymore. It's not just all about your own individual body, but about all possible bodies and all possible entities. So there, the ego really, really doesn't want to be other people and just really, really wants to be itself, but can't if recognized as true. And depending on how you engage with this, you feel existentially extremely liberated because, wow, all these narratives that I had about my own life being so important, they are washed away because I have nothing to lose. I have already every possible experience as me. So there's nothing that you are missing out on, basically, because all possible state spaces of consciousness will be experienced by you. Now, this is, the positive note that you can land on when you accept that. And then there's immense freedom in this. A lot of people are confronted with a nervous system that basically has to then wonder about what it means to be safe. Like, can I ever be safe then if I have to go through all possible conscious experiences? And this is where the real term is nervous system awakening, which basically is the sense of immortality, which also can be found in empty individualism. It's just the nervous system awakening basically to its own immortality, which contradicts its entire point, which is to keep yourself alive. And this can get a lot of wires crossed. There's also where Kundalini awakening stuff happens and all of the other spiritual esoteric stuff. Okay, so very important now. I told you these three models, and now the question is which one is true? Now, instead of having to attach yourself onto a belief about which one of these are true, I hope that the way I have presented this, you can see that in a very meaningful way, all three of them are true. And it entirely depends on how your consciousness organizes itself around reality. For the philosophically inclined, there is a certain need to figure out what is the truth. And it's there to feel comfortable, to be able to stake a position and have an identity that knows what things are like and isn't mistaken, that you know also what happens after death and what is the nature of the afterlife. But I can tell you that I've been doing this work for a decade now, and I shifted through all of these three modes in perception, and I've worked with people who have been in all of these three modes of perception. And I know with certainty that whatever you believe becomes true. There is not really a knowable truth here in some metaphysical sense. It's not that this is just the mind doing mind stuff and there's no relationship to reality. There is. But whatever is knowable is only there in immediate experience. And the moment the mind recognizes this in immediate experience, whatever mode of reality you recognize, it wants to create a belief around it and hold either to it, like it wants to believe that open individualism is real because it loves being all of consciousness, it loves being all of reality. And the moment there's this clinging belief happening that attaches itself, which basically happens for everybody at some point, that attaches itself to one reality model in this way, then there surely happen other negative things in the psyche that cause either more friction or that basically prevent you from deeper dissolving and understanding your ego. Because whatever is opposite of your own reality model is not accepted, or doesn't want to be accepted. Especially, both of these more odd reality models, right? Like open individualism and closed individual and empty individualism. For most ordinary humans, is insanity, right? It's just straight up insanity. And there's also the difference between believing it intellectually or having had a mystical or spiritual experience that makes it obvious that this is the case, that this is how reality works. You can empathize with all of these models and see truth in all of them, but not have to stake out some metaphysical ultimate nature of truth, because it is pointless. Whatever reality is like is how it's like. And your own way to relate with it is what matters. And whatever way you will relate with it is what's going to become your truth. Agnosticism here is very helpful because it makes you not fall into a belief. But if you genuinely have a mystical experience and your consciousness is morphing into one of those modes, well, then this is what is going to happen, and you will have to watch this perspective. What I find very useful is to think about the universe as an infinite imagination machine, or an entity of infinite creativity. And in this space, everything is possible. And that's why this odd reality is possible, why we are having these human meat suits, and why you can dream, and why there's technology. Like, everything is absolutely crazy. Let's be real here. Everything is absolutely crazy and unbelievable, and we're just trained to make it believable. And from there, it seems like that there's truly no limit for reality to be in a way. And this is why you can also model your own consciousness into all shapes and sizes. You can create a reality model where you imagine everything is infinitely interconnected. You can create a reality model where you're the only being in existence. You can create a reality model where the universe is a hellscape and a curse and you must escape it. And you can create a reality model where everything is ultimate freedom and you are blessed to exist. And whatever you create will become your reality. In order to temper what your mind does, the most important thing is not to resist your own recognitions as true. First and foremost, even if there is a sense of fear or uncertainty or slight instability, the second you want to make personal meaning out of it in order to cope with it, belief systems and hardened structures slowly slip in, which might sometimes be necessary in order to ground yourself. Like, if you start to believe that reality is purely solipsistic, maybe you have to be in this state for a while, but it is useful to be able then to ground yourself into the opposite model. In this way, you basically hold multiple perceptions in superposition. And it is possible because you can model all sorts of things in your own reality. You can model reality in many different ways, even somewhat simultaneously. It is the meaning mechanism of the ego that takes a recognition, feels its meaning, and then makes a narrative about it and tries to own it. But reality cannot be owned. Reality cannot be just one singular way. And that's exactly what you're seeing all the time. It's that there are infinite ways for reality to be. And this is why, and I truly mean this, all of these three reality models are true at the same time. Closed individualism is true because you're only the embodied individual in the moment. You cannot be at multiple points at the same time. You are fully you, fully yourself. That's why you can also be healthy and confident and happy being yourself. Reality commits to its modes of being. Empty individualism is true because the sense of self is an illusion. Reality is empty of true self, and all is flux and change. If you remove human memory from the equation, then raw experience pretty much feels like empty frames in existence that have conditioned themselves through all the history of the universe. And open individualism is true because consciousness is what we call reality. And it has also conditioned itself without a personalized, consistent entity. Like the difference between you and me exists in a material sense, like the content of our consciousness is clearly different, but we both are equally awareness and consciousness. Like as a substance of existence, if you're so well, we are made out of the same stuff. So how can we not be caused by the same laws of the universe? The universe knows what it's like to be me as much as it knows what it's like to be you, as much as it knows how it's like to be every human on earth. And by saying that the universe knows what it's like, you're kind of creating this distance, right? You're saying it's not me, it's the universe that is like this. And yeah, it depends on which lens to take. On the closed individualist lens, this is true. On the open individualist sense, you might literally say, I know what it's like to be stray dog. But it starts to sound pretty much insane in normal human situations, because you are not the dog, you are you. The distinction or belief that only one experience is more real than another only makes sense when you take ownership of it and reject whatever you don't own in the moment. But experience is universally pervasive and appears everywhere. If you need grounding in your own reality model and construct something solid and functional for yourself that can find peace amidst this identity craziness, I can analyze your ego in the relationship to yourself, smooth out the edges, and help you be content in your reality model, function as a person, and be more content than you ever have been before. Check the link in the description to understand how my process works and the way you can learn to understand your own experience, your own identity for that matter. Personally, I have to say that I know that if you're struggling with these radical shifts in perception, it won't last forever. I know it can feel like you have seen some truth that cannot be unseen and that you might be stuck in this forever, but it's not the case. Nothing lasts forever. I really thought I destroyed my own mind. And honestly, in a way I did. And that's why I'm doing these videos. But what happens when you go through this deconstruction all the way and deconstruct all of these frictions that the ego creates, then what you end up with is genuinely good. It can make you more embodied and more human. It is a life that is playful instead of abstract and this like boring emptiness. There's genuine joy to be found in the creativity, in the way everything manifests. These insights in how reality functions are simply another step of human psychological evolution. They are the product of our brains that have become so intelligent and so marvelous that they can look way beyond themselves and look at all of what reality is. And the result of this is truly amazing. And there's an immaculate beauty to it all. It implies that nothing is ever lost because everything is already forever yours. And still, you can fully enjoy being yourself and have no need to be somewhere else because everything is fully itself. Everything accepts itself fully. And that's truly magical. I was first very materialistic and like a hardcore closed individualist who was pretty cold and unapathetic, kind of detached from reality, suppressing one's own feelings, of course. And then I became, an kind of empty individualist, believing that everything is subjective. And now, although I still believed in the self in some sorts, this like obsession with the nature of reality being subjective made me sure that, there is not really a truth in everything. Like there's no truth anywhere because everything is still empty in shape. And I didn't call myself an empty individualist back then. I didn't have the vocabulary then. When I had then some more mystical experiences, I started to shift from empty individualism to open individualism, and it started to kind of mesh together a bit. I remember walking down the street like on a random day and then looking at pedestrians and feeling with 100% certain that I am also them, and it kind of freaked me out. And I felt like I blinked and I could see myself from their own eyes, or like I could see their own viewpoint from their own eyes. Or I had times where I looked at my father and I could not really distinguish where my body starts and his body ends. Everything felt very intimate and connected and super pervasive and omnipresent, almost intrusive in a way. And at the same time, it felt extremely isolating because I could not find myself. All of these are transition periods, and with the right kind of attention, you'll find yourself in the same place you've always been.